So we start with impact of external influence, chapter 4. So when I talk about external influence, we're talking about events and issues that are completely beyond the control of the business. So when these issues have occurred, what can a business do? So a business needs to try to analyze these external factors. And what are these external factors? We're talking about the PEST tool analysis. So I wrote, external influences, these are events and issues that are completely beyond the control of the business. So to analyze the external influence, it is logical to use PEST tool analysis. And when we talk about PEST tool analysis, we're talking about political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors that could be considered, that has to be analyzed with external influences. So we start with political. So when we talk about political, we're talking about, okay, I said it is important to pay attention when the business tries to operate in a politically unstable countries, as there might be issues on insecurity which could disrupt the business operation. So one of the external factors that could affect the business activity is politics. And when a country is politically unstable, it makes it difficult for organizations or businesses to set up in there. It will always disrupt their operation. And when operations are being disrupted, then business activity will fall. Businesses will not make revenue. They would even be scared to invest. So that is what we mean by political here. So a stable political country, a country that is politically stable, will attract more investors because investors will be certain and sure that things within that their business activity are secured. I think that's about political. You understand what political is here? We're talking about the stability of a country. If the country is stable, investors will be willing to invest. If a country is politically stable, business activity will move. But if a country is politically unstable, it disrupts business activity, which would affect the business. So, economic. So when you talk about economic, it's still part of the PEST tool analysis, which is talking about the situation of the country in terms of the economy. How is the economy of that country? Is the country in recession or the economy is growing? If the economy is growing, then businesses could set up in there. But if it's a country that is witnessing recession, it becomes difficult for businesses to set up in such countries because their business activity will fall. The demand for their products will reduce. So economic situation is also one of the reasons, one of an external influence that a business must put into consideration, that a business must analyze before setting up its operation. For example, they said a fall in unemployment will increase the demand for goods and services. So if the economy of a country is stable, it means unemployment will fall in such country. And when unemployment falls in such country, it increases the demand for products or demand for goods and services in that country. So that country is economically stable. Then it can attract investors. Businesses could set up. In contrast, if the economy or if the country is witnessing high unemployment rates, then the demand for goods and services in such country will fall. Therefore, it is not ideal. It is not logical for a business to set up in such country. These are another external influence. The third one, we talk about still external economic, stable prices. If prices are stable, it creates more certainty for investors. Then businesses will be able to set up because they know there's stability in the prices of goods and services. And as a result of that, in the future, they would want to invest more. And the last one here is strengthening exchange rate. For a strengthening exchange rate, which is part of the economy, a strengthening exchange rate means that the exchange rate is high in such a country. And if the exchange rate is high in that country, though it will affect the exportation, as exports will become less competitive. But at the same time, importation in such a country will increase. So these are economic influences under PES 2, which is an external influence. Now go to the third one, which is social, S. Social and cultural changes can have impact in business activity. For example, the population of a country can have influence or impact the demand for goods and services. Migration. If there's increase in migration in a country, that means there will be increase in the demand for workforce in such country, which also will increase the demand for goods and services in that country. So that's social, which is S. Then we go to technological, which is T. For technology, technology makes things to become faster. So here I wrote, businesses usually welcome technological development because they can provide new opportunities or improve efficiency. So with technology, it improves productivity and it increases efficiency. So businesses would always want to accept development in technology. What are the reasons why businesses would want to accept or would welcome technology? One, it shortens product life cycle, as new products can be quickly made to replace older ones. With technology, old products would not need to stay longer than expected, as there's machinery or machines that can quickly produce new and latest ones. Two, development in technology implies that machines can replace labor because human resources are often said to be expensive and difficult to manage. So another reason why technological factor is important is that with technology, machines can replace workers, as workers are considered expensive and difficult to manage. So that's another factor that has to be put into consideration, technology. Also, another importance of technology is that the development of social media has helped bridge the gap between customers and businesses. So with social media these days, it's communication between businesses and customers becomes cordial. It becomes easier. So there's no always gap between customers and businesses, which is part of an external factor, which is as a result of technology. So technology has come with social media. So these days, customers and businesses can even interact 24 hours. So we go to the fifth one, which is legal. So when you talk about legal, this comes from the government. The government provides the legal framework in which businesses operate. It also ensures that larger businesses do not exploit smaller ones and make them vulnerable. So with government legislation and laws, it becomes what the yardstick for businesses to set up or to base their operations on. And also, government legislation will help smaller businesses so that they won't become vulnerable to larger businesses. Then the last one is environmental. And when we talk about environmental, we're talking about how people become more aware about environmental situation, pollution, global warming. So people these days understand that it is important to protect the environment. And this is also an influence to business activity. So that's all about PES tool analysis. And I'm going to say PES tool analysis again. When we talk about PES tool analysis, it is an analytical tool that can be used to analyze the impact of external influences. And they are politics, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental analysis. So we go to impact of external influences. Already we know external influences are beyond the business control. So how do they impact? What impact do they have in business activity? One, I wrote here, businesses will be concerned if external influences affect the demand, cost, and operations running their business. So the impact of external influences could be significant when it comes to businesses thinking about it. One, they could think about the demand for the product. They could think about the cost these influences are bringing up, and they could think about how it affects their operations. So we start with demand. If external influences affect the demand for their product, then it will result into lower revenues, lower profits, and weaker cash flow. So if the demand based on external influences such as politics, such as economic situation, social, technological, legal, and environmental situation. If these things affect the demand for a product, it could reduce the revenues made by business, it could reduce the profit they make, and it could also weaken their cash flow. That is what demand is about. They'll go to cost. If the PESTO analysis affects the cost or increases the cost of production for firms, it means their profit margin will fall. And if their profit margin falls, businesses would not have any other choice than to raise the prices of goods and services so that they can still make profits. That is cost, if PESTO analysis affects it. And the third one, operations. When we talk about operations here, businesses often have to change their operation method as a result of an external influence. So with PESTO analysis, maybe legislation, let's take example legislation. Government of a country might come up with new minimum wage, which businesses might feel, wow, we cannot pay this to workers. And if they cannot pay that such amount to workers, they might be considering leaving or moving away from such country to locate into a country that when comparing the wages in that country to the present country, it becomes preferable for them. So businesses might choose to leave a location or leave a country because of new legislation or government legislation that would affect their operations. So these are the three influences or impacts that PESTO analysis could have on businesses. One, we talk about demand. Two, we talk about costs. And three, we talk about the operations. For demand, we're talking about the demand for their goods and services. PESTO analysis might reduce the demand for their goods and services. And if this happens, it reduces their revenues, it reduces their profits, it weakens their cash flow. And if it's about PESTO analysis affecting the cost of production, what does that imply? It implies that the profit margin of that firm will fall. And that firm would not have any other option than to increase its prices. And the third one, operations. Also, PESTO analysis could affect the operational method of firms, which I gave example of legislation. The government of a country might come up with new minimum wage, which businesses might consider too expensive for them to pay. As a result, they might be thinking of relocation. So they could choose to relocate to a country that the minimum wage, when compared to their present location, is preferable. So these are the impacts of external influence to demand, cost, and operations. Now we go to the structure of markets. When we talk about the structure of market will be based on, so when we talk about the structure of markets now, so the structure of market will be based on, structure of market, yes. When we talk about the structure of market will be based on the level of competition in that market. And what is competition? Competition is the rivalry that exists between businesses whenever they are about to sell their product or service in the market. That is what competition is. So look at what I wrote here. I said the structure of market. The structure of market will be based on their level of competition. I said that earlier. What is competition? It is the rivalry that exists between firms when they are trying to sell goods in a particular market. So the kind of rivalry that exists between firms when they are about to sell their goods or services in the market is what we call competition. So in the market, we have competitive market and uncompetitive market. So what does a competitive market mean? Competitive markets are markets that have large buyers and sellers of products. So large buyers and sellers of products. And these products will be what? Of close substitutes. So when you talk about a competitive market is a market that have large numbers of buyers and sellers in a very competitive market. That means they sell homogeneous products or substitute products. So for uncompetitive markets, I wrote, these markets are dominated by single producer or just a few large businesses. So when we talk about uncompetitive market, we're talking about monopoly and oligopoly. So what's a monopoly? I wrote, a monopoly is a market structure that has a single buyer supplying the whole market. So when you have a single supplier in the whole market, it is a monopoly, which is an example of an uncompetitive market. Then we have oligopoly. For oligopoly, this is a market dominated by few large businesses or large producers. Oligopoly is a market dominated by few large producers. So oligopoly and monopoly are examples of uncompetitive markets. So we move on from there to changing competitive environment. So when we talk about changing competitive environment, here I wrote, over time, the structure of market is likely to change. It is a market, so it's not constant. So it's either there's a fierce competition, or there's a fall in competition. So whichever way, the structure of the market is likely to change. So here I wrote, there might be new business entering the market, which intensifies the competition. In contrast, in some markets, there might be consolidation. And what is consolidation? The process of joining together to become larger or more powerful. So when two or more businesses come together so that they can become bigger or larger, that is what we call consolidation. So for changing a competitive structure, it means there might be fierce competition or consolidation. So put that in mind. In a changing competitive environment, two things are likely to happen or occur: fierce competition or consolidation. So we move on. So we go to the impact on business of a changing competitive environment. So when there's fierce competition, how does it impact to the business? And when there's consolidation, how does it have impact in the business? So we start with the impact on business now. The first one, new entrants. So when I talk about new entrants, I wrote, when new entrants in the market increase competition, existing businesses have to consider their position. So one of the impacts on business is for a competitive or for a fierce competition, which means new businesses are setting up or coming into the industry. When new businesses come into the industry, it is important for the existing businesses to start thinking about their position. And you know what market positioning is? Where you are at, the position you have in that market, in terms of the buyers you have, the seller, the consumers you have, your reputation in the market. You should start thinking about it. So when there are new entrants in the market, it is important for a business to think about their position. 2, new products. When a new product appears in the market, businesses may be forced to make changes on their own. So what I'm trying to say in essence is this: when products are being produced, new products are being produced in the market, existing products might need to be readjusted so that they can also be attractive to customers, because new products have more attraction to customers. So as a business that has an existing product in that market, it should start thinking about how to repackage or to make its own product also appealing to customers. This is another impact. And the third one, consolidation. I already told you what consolidation is. So when consolidation occurs in market, the number of businesses in the market falls, but some of the existing businesses become bigger and they can become a threat to others. So with consolidation, it means existing businesses might join our hands together and become so bigger or powerful. But these will have effects or negative effects on other businesses that are unable to consolidate. So that's about the impact on businesses of a changing competitive environment. It has impact on the new entrants, which are new businesses coming in, new products, which might affect existing products, because existing products also needs to look more appealing to customers, and consolidation, which means businesses coming together to become more powerful, which might become threat to others that are unable to consolidate in that market. So we go to Porter's 5 forces. So for Porter's 5 forces, so Michael Porter in 1985 outlines 5 forces of factors which can determine the profitability of an industry. So for Michael Porter in 1985, he tried to analyze 5 factors or forces that could influence the profitability of an industry. And what are these 5 forces? Number 1, potential entrants. And when we talk about potential entrants, we're talking about new businesses that might want to set up in that industry. So I wrote, this implies to the threat of new entrants. So when new businesses come into an industry, they could pose a threat to other existing businesses, which means the profitability in such, the revenue in that industry will have to be shared. The market share in that industry will have to be amongst those businesses, which means the market share might likely fall. And if the market share in that industry fall because of new entrants, revenue will fall, profitability will fall. So this is what Porter is talking about. 2, suppliers. And when we talk about suppliers can also influence the profitability of a business. So what do they wrote here? Porter said, the bargaining power of suppliers as they want to maximize profit, and this could be through charging higher prices. The bargaining power of suppliers. If suppliers are able to have the bargaining power to influence prices of what they sell to customers, then they can maximize profit. So if they have edge over their customers, they could charge premium prices, which allows them to make more profit. But in contrast, if suppliers are unable to bargain properly with their customers, they might not be able to make profits. That's Porter's analysis. That's Michael Porter. The third one, industry competitors. So this implies to rivalry among existing firms. If rivalry is fierce, businesses can reduce their rivalry by creating or forming a cartel. And when we talk about a cartel, what's a cartel? A group of businesses coming together to reduce the competition in that market or in that industry. So when there is fierce competition in the industry, businesses might do what? Might form a cartel. And when they form this cartel, it reduces competition within them. So, and that would also reduce their profitability. Then we go to the fourth one, which is among the 5 Porter's factors, and it is substitutes. And when we talk about substitutes, we're talking about your competitors, your rivals, the products they produce. So here I wrote, the more the substitute, the lesser businesses can charge. The lesser the substitute, the more profit firms could make. So when in the market, the substitutes are much, it means businesses will not be able to charge higher prices. And if they are unable to charge higher prices, they might not be able to make profits. But in contrast, if in the market, the substitute in that market is less, then businesses might be able to charge higher prices and be able to maximize profit. The fifth one, which is the last among the Porter's 5 forces, is for the buyers. Who are the buyers? We're talking about the consumers, the customers. Customers also have, if customers are seen as kingpin of a business or are seen to have bargaining power, then they can beat down prices of goods and services, which means the profitability of firms might fall. So look at what I wrote about buyers here. This implies to the bargaining power of buyers. If buyers are considered as market power, if they are considered as kingpin in the business, they will be able to beat down prices offered by suppliers, and this affects profits. So if buyers are able to beat down prices of goods and services, this could affect the profitability of firms, as they will have the ability to beat down prices of goods and services. So if they are able to beat down prices of goods and services, profit will be less for businesses to make. So that's all about pest tool analysis. So the topic, once again, I'm going to recap the lesson, which is impact of external influences. And we said external influences are factors that affect the business, which are beyond the control of the business. And whenever businesses have to analyze these factors, businesses have to use the PES-tool analysis, which is the political, the economic situation, the social, the technological, the legal, and the environmental analysis. These are all that has to be made when considering the impact of external influences. Then I talked about the impact of external influences, which are for the demand, the cost, and operations. I talked about demand. I said, if PES-tool analysis affects the demand for a product, it could result to lower profits, lower revenue, and weaker cash flow for businesses. If PES-tool analysis affects the cost, increases the cost of businesses, it reduces their profit margin. And as a result of that, they might be forced to increase their prices, which might not be good for them and for their operations. If PES-tool analysis can also affect the operational method of firms, which I made mention of the legal, which is legislation. So government legislation might make businesses to think of relocation. Then we go to the structure of the market. And I said, the structure of the market will be based on the level of competition in that market, which I define what competition is, the rivalry that exists between different businesses when they are trying to sell their products in the market. And we have two types of market there. We have competitive markets and uncompetitive markets. For competitive markets, these are markets that have large numbers of buyers and sellers producing closed substitute products. Then we have uncompetitive markets, which are what? Markets that are dominated by single producer or just few large businesses, which I made an example of monopoly and oligopoly. For monopoly, we're talking about a market structure where we have one supplier in that entire market. And we have oligopoly, which is what? A market dominated by few large producers. Then we talk about the changing competitive environment. I said over time, the competitive market will change because it is not constant. Sometimes there will be fierce competition, and other time there will be consolidation. So you have to put in the mind that when we're talking about changing competitive environment, we're talking about fierce competition and consolidation. And what is consolidation? The process of joining together to become more powerful. Then go to the impact of business, the impact on business of a changing competitive environment when there is fierce competition or consolidation. We talked about the new entrants. And for the new entrants, when new businesses come into the business, existing business have to put into consideration their position. They have to start thinking about their position in the market. We talked about new products. And when we talk about new products, we're talking about how existing products should also try to make their products to be more appealing to customers. If not, they lose out. Then for consolidation, I said when there's consolidation, when consolidation occurs, number of businesses in the market will fall, but it will become a threat because they become bigger and they now become a threat to other businesses that are unable to consolidate. Then we go to Michael Porter's 5 forces. In 1985, he outlined potential entrants, suppliers, industry competitors, buyers, and substitutes as influences to the profitability of a business. So for potential entrants, he said, and I quote, "This implies to the threat of new entrants. So when there are new entrants into the business, it reduces the market share of a business and at the same time reduces their profitability." He talks about the suppliers. He said, the purchasing power, the bargaining power of suppliers might have a significant effect in their profitability. If suppliers are able to bargain, if suppliers have the bargaining power over their customers, then they will be able to charge premium prices, which will result to higher profitability. Then he talked about the third one, which is industry competitors, which implies to the rivalry among existing businesses. So if existing businesses, if rivalry among existing businesses is fierce, they could form a cartel. And what is a cartel? A cartel is what? A group of businesses coming together to reduce competition. And when they form this cartel, it reduces their profitability. The fourth one is substitutes. So here I said, the more the substitute in the market, the less the profit that firms will make. Why? Because prices will fall. But the less the profit, the less the substitute of the market, the more the profit firms could make. Why? Because prices could be rise and prices could increase to make them make more profit. And the last one amongst the portal's 5 forces or factors is for the buyers. And if buyers are considered as the market power, it means they could beat down prices of goods and services. And if they do so, it affects the profitability of a business, because at that point in time, businesses will not be able to make more profit. So that's all about the impact of external